It's always very interesting to me to speak about dreams in a fairly short period of time, because I have been personally keeping a dream journal for almost 40 years now. I have been teaching other people about dreams for about 35 years. And there are so many ways that they have helped me and changed my life, as well as ways that I've seen them change other people's lives. It's a little bit of a challenge to decide, okay, in 45 minutes, what's going to be the most important thing to say about dreams? So I guess the first question I have is, how many of you remember your dreams? I would think most of you do, because you're here at a program on dreams. And you know, you kind of chuckle about that, but that in itself is a very intriguing idea to me, is that dreaming is a universal experience. It doesn't matter what age someone is, what culture they're from, what race they are, what religion they are. Everybody dreams. Not everybody knows that they dream. So if you ask people at your work, do you dream? Some people might say yes. Some people might say no. What I've found is when I start talking about dreams, oftentimes people who don't really pay attention to dreams will say, I don't dream. But there's this one dream that I had, you know, and they'll tell about some dream from childhood they still remember. Or they'll say, I don't dream, but now that you think about it, and then they'll talk about some dream that they actually do remember. So I think the truth is that people who don't pay attention to dreams don't really understand how valuable they are. Throughout history, there are people who have paid attention to dreams, and some of those dreams have changed the course of history. This is something I found out fairly recently, that Mahatma Gandhi, who was quite significant in freeing the Indian people from the British Empire, one of the first big events, if you want to call it that, where he learned about passive non-resistance or non-violence, was leading a tremendous number of people down to the sea for what's called the Great Salt March. What was happening is that the British people were taxing the Indian people for salt. And he had a dream that gave him this inspired vision that if he led all these people down to the sea, and if they took the water out of the sea and put it out in the sun would evaporate the water and they'd be left with salt. So they could make their own salt. They didn't have to buy it from the British, and therefore they were able to avoid paying the taxes. That was a dream-inspired idea that he paid attention to. Harriet Tubman, who led a number of slaves out of slavery through the Underground Railway, the places that she discovered for the Underground Railway came to her in dreams, both nighttime dreams and waking visions. Some people say she was a narcoleptic, meaning that she slept often throughout the day. And I don't know if that's true, but her dreams gave her the places that she was able to use to free these slaves. Dreams can be used for artistic inspiration. Most of you here probably know the song Yesterday, Paul McCartney's song. Well, I believe this story is accurate because I've heard it several places. He dreamed that music, and being a musician, he had a piano in his bedroom, so he woke up, he played the tune on the piano, he wrote the music on the score, and it was so haunting and so compelling, he didn't think it was his. He figured it was something that he had heard somewhere, and so he tried to find that music, and he couldn't find it anywhere. And the lyrics that were in his mind as he dreamed it were something kind of silly, like scrambled eggs, something, something, love your legs. And he realized that that probably was not going to be a song that would sell very well with those lyrics. So he took the music from his dream, and then in his conscious mind, he composed different lyrics to produce the song Yesterday. So that is one thing that's important to know about dreams, is that sometimes they can give you inspired ideas that work completely as you dream it. Sometimes you have to tweak it a little bit and receive what the dream gives you, and then also work with it in your conscious mind. Scientists have dreamed discoveries. The periodic table of elements, that entire table was seen by Dmitri Mendeleev in a dream. There are inventions that came from dreams. I think probably more inventions than people probably let us know come from dreams, like the sewing machine that we use to this day, the needle, where the thread goes through the bottom of the needle. That was dreamed by Elias Howe. And one of my favorite stories about dreams is how the first Afro-American female made her millions, and this was in the late 1800s. So if you think about in the late 1800s how much influence women had and how much influence Afro-Americans had in this country, it was practically none. And there's a woman named Madam C.J. Walker. People in Indianapolis know her because there's a theater named after her. She was very poor and had something that was happening that they think probably was from the many stresses of her life that was causing her hair to fall out. And she didn't know what to do about it. Whatever health practitioner she was going to didn't know what to do about it. And one night she had a dream that a big man came to her and gave her a formula that had different herbs that she remembered. She wrote that down. And some of those herbs were available in Africa, so somehow she was able to send away for those. She mixed up this potion and massaged it into her scalp, and it caused her hair to grow back in. So she continued to use it, and it continued to cause her hair to grow back in. She gave it to some of her friends, and it caused their hair to grow faster. And so she developed this tonic called Madam C.J. Walker's Hair Tonic, very inspired name, as you can tell. And she made $1 million. So $1 million in the late 1800s is quite a lot of money, a lot more money than $1 million is today. And to think that that could have happened to a woman who didn't even have the right to vote, and an Afro-American woman, that is quite remarkable. So those are just some examples of how dreams can be very profound. Dreams can be used for everyday insight, everyday guidance. For many years, I didn't even think about specifically asking my dreams for questions. I first started writing my dreams down before I knew how to interpret them. I was in college. I was taking some English classes, and in one of the creative writing classes I had, a friend of mine wrote poetry that was really beautiful. And I wrote poetry, but my poetry was pretty adolescent. It was wordy. It didn't really have it didn't have a lot of images to it. And this poetry that my friend wrote was just beautiful images. And I asked her where she came up with that. And she said, I get them from my dreams. Well, at that time, I knew that I dreamed. I had nightmares sometimes, but I didn't remember the dreams very long after awakening. So I asked her how she was able to remember them well enough to write poetry, and she said, well, you have to write them down. And I said, well, how are you supposed to write them down if you don't remember them? That doesn't make sense. She said, get a notebook, put it by your bed. Before you go to sleep, tell yourself, I want to remember my dreams. Make sure you have a pen there or a pencil. And as soon as you wake up, write down the first thing that comes into your mind. So even if you don't think you've remembered a dream, write down a word, a feeling, and you'll be surprised. Pretty soon you'll start remembering dreams. So that's what I did. I actually had a roommate at the time who was an artist who was making handmade journals. And so she gave me a handmade journal that I used, and I put it by my bed. And sure enough, because I had that journal there, and I told myself I wanted to remember dreams, I started to remember them. And pretty soon I was remembering a lot of dreams. So to this day, I still keep a dream journal. I happen to like these composition books you can get, because sometimes I write down my dreams when I'm half asleep. If you wake up in the middle of the night, how many of you have ever awakened in the middle of the night with a dream that's really profound? You say, I'll remember that dream, but you don't write it down because you're too tired. And how many of you actually remember it when you wake up in the morning? Once in a while, but usually not too often. So if you have the notebook there, what I do is I just close my eyes and I write the dream down, and I have learned to use my other hand so that sometimes the lines are this far apart, because I have been known to write down a dream and then write on top of the words I've already written when I'm half asleep. So the reason why I like this kind of dream journal is I feel okay about writing in these cheap little composition books that are very messy. If I have a really nice journal that has a leather cover or it's very artistically done, it actually kind of inhibits me from writing my dreams down. But that's not true of everybody. I know some people have beautiful journals and that inspires them to write their dreams. The important thing is that you have something that you put by your bed that is dedicated to your dreams. It doesn't have your to-do list. It doesn't have your grocery shopping list. It's just for your dreams. If you don't have a dream journal and would like one of these, we have some of these little handmade ones that are free. So if you'd like one and raise your hand, these guys can give you one that you can use. This will just get you started. It only has a few pages, so it has enough for maybe 2 really long dreams, or if you have short one-liners, you can write several nights worth of dreams. It's important to realize that everything you dream can have a meaning, even if it's just a one-liner. And I want to give you an example of that. Oftentimes, I will incubate dreams, which means to ask your dreams a particular question. And this is something that I've learned to do over the years. As I said, I used to just allow dreams to tell me whatever they wanted to tell me. And so I don't incubate dreams all the time, but last night, before I went to bed, I knew I was coming here to give this lecture, and so I asked my dreams to tell me, what do the people need? That was the question I asked of my dreams, meaning you all and whoever would be here. And because, as I understand, this isn't a program people sign up for ahead of time, I didn't know who was going to be here. I don't even know if all of you knew that you were going to be here. Maybe you planned, maybe at the last minute you came. So this is the dream that I had. It was fairly short. I was on the phone talking with a man who I know who has recently kind of reappeared. I knew him about 13 years ago, not very well. And I look at him as being pretty supportive and encouraging and perceptive and pretty curious. So he called me up, we were on the phone, and he told me he had just read this book that I wrote, which is on visualization and the law of attraction, and he said he was going to send me $100 for it. And I said, that's too much. And he said, you should receive money for the things that you do. And that was it. That was the dream. So if I interpreted dreams physically, I might interpret that to mean one of you is going to give me $100 for this book. However, I don't think that's what that dream means. How I understand dreams at one level is that all dreams can be interpreted symbolically, meaning that every dream is about you, and the people in the dreams can symbolize aspects of yourself. The things in your dreams symbolize something about you. So I would interpret a book as a symbol for knowledge, and this one in particular, knowledge about visualization, because that's what the book is about. And I interpret money to mean value. So what that dream was telling me is that I need to value, to a greater extent than I do, the knowledge that I have about visualization. And this man is an aspect of myself, so it's a part of my inner self that is encouraging me, supporting me, that also my inner self recognizing the value. Well, interestingly enough, this title of this book came to me in a dream. And so I want to tell you this story because this can give you an idea about how to incubate dreams. book titles are not really my forte. I like writing, but the title is oftentimes not so easy for me to come up with. So I was writing this book on visualization. I was finished with the writing. I was working on the layout, and I still didn't have a title that I was happy with. So one night I was giving a talk about visualization, and this was soon after the movie The Secret had come out, and so everybody was talking about the law of attraction. And this book I was working on was actually a revision of a book that I had written maybe 15 years before that, before the law of attraction became popular. I mean, the law has been around for probably thousands of years, but people popularly, I heard talk about it when this movie The Secret came out. So I was talking to this group of people about visualization, and I had a bunch of different ideas for books. I had them written on napkins, they were on the backs of envelopes, they were on scraps of paper. And so I decided, kind of like that TV show, I was going to poll the audience and say, does anybody have an idea for a good title for this book? And so they gave me some ideas, and I didn't really like any of those either. So I was going to bed that night. I put my dream journal by my bed, and I thought, I'm going to ask my dream for help. And so I wrote in my dream journal, please give me a dream with a title that expresses the meaning of this book on visualization. And what I was expecting is that I would have a dream of something like going into a bookstore and I'd see this book on a shelf with the title, or walking into someone's living room and seeing a coffee table with this book on it with the title. So that's what I was expecting, was a visual type of dream. What happened is that as I was awakening, I heard in my mind really clearly the words, the law of attraction and other secrets of visualization. And I wasn't even fully awake, so I wrote that down. And then when I came fully awake and I read my dream notebook, I read the question I had asked for a dream that would give me the perfect title to this book. And then I read the words that I wrote down, and I thought, that's a pretty boring title, kind of like Madam C.J. Walker's hair tonic. And so I wasn't going to use it. However, I knew that I had asked my dream specifically for a title, and I knew that that was not a consciously thought up title because I wasn't even awake when those words came to me. And I realized if I was going to ask my dream for something and then my dream gives me something, I ought to listen to it and not look a gift horse in the mouth. So I used that as the title for the book, and I guess because of timing, it turned out to be a great title. It sold out within the first year of printing and had to go into a second printing, and it has continued to sell very well. So that's one lesson that I have learned with dreams, is that if you're going to ask, it's important to pay attention to what your dreams give you. Even if it's not what you thought it was going to be, even if you might not really like what it's telling you, even if it seems kind of weird, it's important to pay attention. And in just a moment, I'm going to draw you a diagram of how I understand that process works with visualization. But before that, I want to give you one other example of a dream that I incubated that I also was almost not going to pay attention to because it seemed kind of weird. And this was a healing dream. This is one of the ways that dreams can be very valuable. They can provide healings, like you can actually become healed in a dream, and they can also give you knowledge that can aid you to heal. And I don't have a lot of lucid dreams. I know some people, especially through this organization, the International Association for the Study of Dreams, who practice lucid dreaming, which is being aware in a dream that you're dreaming. And many of those people have had miraculous healings in their dreams when they're aware that they're dreaming. There are many ways that dreams can give you healing insight. In fact, there's a man who's doing research right now for women who have had breast cancer, who had, they're called prodromal dreams, meaning dreams that have predicted that. and he's doing research. Fortunately, he is aware enough and enlightened enough that he actually listens to his patients' dreams. So if they come into him with a dream that says, I need you to x-ray this part of my body because I dreamed it, he'll do it instead of saying you're crazy. And so he actually has helped some people to heal without going through surgery and chemotherapy because he's paid attention to their dreams. So this is the experience that I had. I drive a lot. I'm a teacher with the School of Metaphysics. We have 16 branches. I spend a lot of time in a car driving from school to school. And some years ago, I needed to drive from St. Louis to Lexington, Kentucky, where we used to have a school. We have a school now in Louisville. And it was in January. There was a big ice storm. I don't know if you've ever driven Highway 64, which goes straight east from St. Louis to Kentucky and then Cincinnati. But it can get extremely icy and they don't clear it very well. If you go east, Highway 70 is a better highway to take. So I had delayed my trip for a couple of days because the road conditions were horrible. And I really couldn't delay it anymore because I had some appointments I had to get to. So I got in my car and the roads were treacherous. There were trucks off the highway. There was only one lane. The other lane was still iced over. And so I'm driving, really tense mentally, emotionally, and physically. I wasn't going to use cruise control because the highway was so icy. And it should have been about a 4-hour drive. It took me maybe 6 or 7 hours. So, here I am driving like this the whole time, tense on ice. And when I got out of my car, I realized that my lower back was quite painful. And I kind of gingerly moved around. And by the time I went to bed, I could hardly even move. It was so painful. So it was pretty alarming to me because I have not had serious problems like this, but I know a couple of people who have lower back problems who have been incapacitated, on their back, that they can't even get up out of bed. And so I didn't want that to happen. And I knew I couldn't afford to spend days lying flat on my back. So before I went to bed, I had a very serious talk with my dreams. And I said, there are two things I want. I want to wake up completely pain-free, and I want to have a dream that tells me what I need to know or what I need to understand or what I need to change so that I can heal my back, or so my back can heal, I think I said. So I wrote those two things in my dream journal. I went to bed, and when I awakened, the first thing I did is I kind of felt my back and it was pain-free, which was pretty amazing to me because even though I asked my dream for that, I know I didn't fully believe that that was going to happen. And so I said a prayer of gratitude because it really was pain-free and I wanted to make sure it stayed that way. And as I was awakening, before I felt my back, I had the same kind of experience I had with this book title, is I heard words in my mind that I wrote down before I was fully awake, and those words said, walk backwards. So when I came fully awake and I read those words, I thought, that's crazy. But again, I knew it had come from my dreams, and so I got up and I walked backwards. And what I found when I walked backwards is that it felt really good. And I don't know if you've ever done that, but when you walk backwards, you have to move your spine differently than when you walk forwards. I think that's why kids run backwards. And if you watch kids, they always play around going backwards. So I walked backwards around the place I was in a few times, and then I had to get in my car again and drive to my next destination. And so this part of the story is what really convinced me that that message from my dreams was true. I got in my car and I had this audio cassette tape that a friend had given me months before that I had never listened to. I wasn't even really interested in listening to it. I'd kind of thrown it in the console in the middle. And for some reason that day that I didn't have any conscious reason to do it, I took that audio cassette and I popped it in the tape player of my car. And It was an educational tape from a man who develops oils, essential oils. And he was talking about some of the countries he goes to where he gets the different herbs and flowers that he uses for the oils that he distills. And he was talking about China, and on the college campus in China, the people walk backwards because it adjusts their lower spine. So I heard that, and I thought, oh my gosh, this is exactly the same message that my dream just gave me. And I am certain that the reason why, unknown to my conscious mind, I decided that day to pop that tape in the tape player that I'd never even been interested in, is so that I could get the confirmation in my waking state that what my dream was telling me was accurate. And so then after that, I did some internet research, and there is something that happens when you walk backwards that actually adjusts the pelvis, which is why it stabilizes the spine. So that was really a very delightful experience to me, because it showed me how powerful it can be to communicate with dreams and how much our dreams really want us to get the message. I mean, my subconscious mind wanted me to pay attention to that message enough that somehow it communicated to me that day to pop that tape in the tape player. So what I want to show you is how I understand how that works. And this is based on the education that I've learned through the School of Metaphysics, so I will present it to you. You can consider it. How I understand the essence of each one of us is light, or awareness. And pretty much any scripture that I've read says that that's the first creation is light. Scientists say that at the center of every physical thing is a photon or a particle of light. And if you think about your everyday experiences, when there's something that becomes clear to you, the words we use to describe it have to do with light. People will say, oh, I see the light. Or we talk about people being enlightened who are very aware, who have a very high consciousness. Or we talk about having a moment of illumination. How I understand each one of us is that we are an individual spark of light or particle of light, and I am. And that what we are here for, as I understand it, is to fully express or manifest the I am that we are, which is a little bit different from sometimes what I have heard people talk about when they talk about manifestation, that we're here to manifest things, you know, like cars, relationships, jobs. Although we can manifest those things, which is part of why I wrote this book, was to educate people on how to do it. I don't really see that as being our purpose. I mean, think about how many people there are now who are trying to get rid of all the things they've manifested. You know, they're decluttering their homes, they're trying to get rid of all the stuff. It's like we have way too much stuff. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with stuff. I mean, I'm glad I have a car, I'm glad I have clothes to wear. However, the purpose, as I understand it, is to manifest the light that we are. And as I understand what I call the mind, it is a vehicle for us to do that. So at the highest part of us, I call this superconscious mind. The innermost self, which is where we dream, is the subconscious mind. And then the outer self, which is what we use mostly when we're awake, is the conscious mind. How I understand the relationship between the conscious and subconscious minds is that it's kind of like a garden. That the conscious mind, when you say, I want to know how to heal my back, or I want to have an inspired business idea, or I want to know what the people need, whatever it is, those desires are like seeds that the conscious mind plants in the subconscious mind by asking, either by visualizing, by asking a dream. I look at that differently from prayer, which is appealing to the Creator, and that kind of energy or insight comes actually from beyond the mind through superconscious mind, where the insights from dreams, for the most part, come from subconscious mind. I do think it's possible sometimes to have dreams that are divinely inspired. I think that when we incubate dreams and we're saying, sometimes people call it the dreaming or talking to subconscious mind, I think those insights come from subconscious mind, which is, for most people, beyond what we think about consciously. Ideally, this is how I understand intuition, we become conscious of what's in the subconscious mind. So it's not like this is a solid line, we're able to receive the insight. And that's one of the ways dreams can help us, is to become more open to intuition and to intuitive insight. So incubating a dream is when you specifically ask a dream a question. And if you would like to participate in this, we're actually doing a research experiment asking people to incubate dreams on the question, how can I better fulfill my soul's purpose? And I think you got a piece of paper that had that question. If you would like to participate in that, we'll send you an email with a link. There's a questionnaire you can fill out. And before you leave, I want to give you some instructions about how to incubate dreams. Whether you participate in that or not, you can use it for any incubation. Part of my interest in educating people about incubating dreams is that I believe there are so many ways that dreams can help people, not only individually, I think they can help humanity. And there are some groups that I'm a part of that once in a while incubate dreams as a group for particular purposes. Like in 2008, when everybody was all freaked out because supposedly the economy was crashing, we did a group incubation on what our dreams could tell us about the economy. And we got some really wonderful insights. There's a group that a woman started that's called 350 Dreamers, and I think it's 4 times a year on the new moon. If you're interested, you can look up 350 Dreamers. She asked people to incubate dreams for global healing. And then everybody posts their dreams on a website to see what kind of connecting links there are. There's another group, an email group called the World Dreams Peace Bridge that arose after September 11th, 2001, because there were quite a number of people that had dreams about that happening before it happened, but they didn't really know what they were dreaming about until after it happened. And so the woman who started this World Dreams Peace Bridge thought, you know, what if we had a place where people could share their dreams and maybe we could dream up some peace, is how she talks about it. So I think that there are a lot of promising ways that people who care about humanitarian concerns or global concerns can use their dreams to see what our collective understanding has. And individually, there are all kinds of ways that dreams can help us individually. There's a couple of other kinds of dreams I want to tell you about, because I've had a few very profound experiences of these. And these are visitation dreams. A visitation dream, most people refer to a visitation dream as dreaming of someone who has died. It is possible to have a visitation dream where someone who is alive can come and visit you in a dream. But I want to talk about the ones of people who have died. And the way that I understand how and why that occurs is that when somebody dies, they shed the conscious mind, they shed the physical body, and they go into what I would call the inner levels of consciousness. So they actually exist in the same place where we go when we dream, the way that I understand that experience. It is very common for people to have visitation dreams. What I've found is that many people are afraid to talk about it because they don't want someone to talk them out of it. They don't want someone to say, oh, that's just wish fulfillment. Oh, you're just having that dream because you're missing so-and-so. Because most people who have a visitation dream have no doubt in their mind that it was actually their loved one visiting them, or that they were visiting that loved one. So if you've had dreams like that, then what I would encourage you to do is to talk about it without being afraid someone's going to talk you out of it, because what I've found is that when I've talked about my visitation dreams, it opens the floodgates with other people who really want to talk about their experiences. When I was 15 years old, my father died, and I was not raised with a religion, so that was a very difficult time in my life for many reasons. One of which was, it was extremely confusing to me because I didn't know where he went. He had cancer, so he was dying for a period of time. He was on some bizarre medications. And so it wasn't like one day he was alive and the next day he was dead. It was more like he was dying over a long period of time and in and out, and I just didn't have any way to even understand what was happening. And I don't remember ever having any dreams where he came to me after he died. He may have, but I think probably because of all of the kind of bizarre medical treatments that he was willing to undergo and the medications, I don't know if he would have been able to communicate in dreams. So some years later, when I was 43, the man I was married to died. He was only 42. By that time, I had already studied dreams and worked with dreams for many years, and so had John. We actually met through the School of Metaphysics. I wasn't there when he died. I didn't have a chance to say goodbye to him. I guess maybe we could have predicted his death. He had juvenile diabetes and was going through different treatments, but everybody thought he was doing well and was going to live for a number of years. He was actually waiting for a kidney transplant. Well, that didn't happen. He died. I wasn't there. We didn't get to say goodbye. And so I was sure that he was going to come to me in my dreams so that he could say goodbye. And then when he didn't, after a few weeks, I thought, well, it's because I'm not sleeping very well. But then even after I started to be able to sleep, he still didn't come to me in my dreams. And I missed him a lot. So I decided one night I was going to ask him to come to me in a dream. So first I wrote a long letter to him in my dream notebook, telling him some of the things that I wanted to tell him, telling him I really wanted to say goodbye. And I kind of pleaded in my dream journal, please come to me in my dreams. And so that night I had a dream, and I was at a graduation ceremony. I was in the audience, and there was the stage that was kind of far off, like farther away than that back wall is from where I am. And on the stage, I saw all of these people sitting in chairs, and there was John, and he was wearing this red baseball cap that he used to wear sometimes. And I saw him, but I wasn't really sure if he could see me. And as the dream was ending, somebody walked up to me, and they gave me my Bible that apparently I'd left on the stage. And when I picked it up, this little piece of paper fluttered out. And on the piece of paper, there was this heart, kind of like that I knew was in John's handwriting. And as I was awakening, I realized that that was the only way that he could communicate with me. He had become blind before he died, and so he didn't really write in words a whole lot. However, the insight that I had was that he was still graduating to the other side, and he wasn't really used to the body on the other side. He didn't really have the ability for verbal communication yet, either spoken or writing, and that's why he hadn't come to me. It's not that he didn't want to, it's that he wasn't ready. And so that dream was so profound. It wasn't what I was expecting. I mean, I was expecting we would see each other, we'd hug each other, we'd get to have this conversation. And so it was kind of bittersweet. However, the sweet part of it was that I knew he was there. I knew we were connected, and the bitter part was that I knew I had to be more patient, which I was not at the time. However, I did become more patient. I actually had some waking visitations where he came to me when I was awake that were very clear. And then about a year after he died, I had this dream that I want to tell you because I believe it has a message that was not only for me, I think it's a message that can be used for anyone. He died on September 10th of the year 2000. And so I decided after a year of mourning, I wanted to take a day off of work, spend it with my memories of him, meditate, go to a church in the nearby town where we lived and pray. And September 10th, 2001 was a Monday, and I had a number of classes to teach. So that was not a good day for me to take off from work. So I decided, okay, I'll do it the next day, September 11th, 2001. So I woke up in the morning. We lived in the country at the time. Got up, got dressed, got in my car to drive to this church where I was going to pray. I turned on the radio, and the first thing I hear on the radio is the radio announcer yelling, shouting, "The second tower has been hit." And so I listened to this unfolding story of what happened in New York that morning on September 11th, 2001. And like probably everybody, it was a very surreal kind of day, just, seeing what happened, hearing what happened. Personally, I was pretty worried because my sister-in-law lives in Manhattan. Her son, who at the time was probably 11, was living with her. I had some other friends who live in New York. I grew up in a suburb of New York, and I couldn't get a hold of anybody. All of the phone lines were out, the cell towers were down, so I had no idea if these people were dead or alive, and I couldn't get a hold of them. And I knew that all I could really do was to send out my light and send out my love and send out whatever kind of prayers and thoughts that I had for goodness and light and safety. So that night I had a dream, and John was in New York helping the people who had died in the World Trade Center. And I looked at him and I said, "Are they okay?" with this kind of urgency in my voice, meaning the people who died in the World Trade Center. And when I said that, he lit up in this amazing light. I mean, like a celestial, heavenly light. And he beamed this amazing smile and he said, "Yes, they're fine. Once they're out, they're fine." And when he said once they're out, I heard this whoosh, and I felt this kind of release of spirit, and I could feel what he was talking about, is that once people were released from this bodily prison, they were fine. We were the ones who weren't fine. Those of us in these bodies who were scared, who were angry, who were worried, alarmed, that we were the ones that were having difficulty. But the people who had suddenly died and they were out of their body, they were fine. So I woke up from that dream, and it was a very comforting. It was centering. It was comforting to me to see John because he looked beautiful. He looked healthy. He looked happy. If he were alive, he probably would have been one of those people who would have driven from Missouri to New York to help the people in New York. So I knew he was doing what he wanted to do, helping people. And it really helped me as a counselor and as a minister to help other people who were dealing with their grief about people who had died. And it has continued to help me personally, as well as a teacher and a counselor and a minister, because everybody deals with death. They deal with death of loved ones. They deal with thinking about their own death, perhaps, if they're in the process of dying. I mean, it's a universal experience. So that's one of the ways that I've found that dreams can be very, not only instructive, very centering, as they can connect us with that kind of universal reality that connects all of us with each other. I think what I would like to do is give you instructions about how to incubate dreams and then open it up to any questions you might have. The reason why it's called dream incubation is that to incubate something means to prepare the conditions for something to develop. Like they have incubators for babies who are born premature. At the College of Metaphysics, we hatch chicks, and every once in a while, for some reason, a hen won't sit on her eggs, and so we'll put them in an incubator. So it provides the proper conditions for something to hatch. So if you want to hatch a new idea of whatever, how to heal, how to come up with the next business idea, artistic inspiration, incubating a dream means you're creating the proper conditions in yourself, in your mind, for that idea to grow and develop in your subconscious mind. So the first thing is to decide what you want to ask and to create a very clear statement or question. One thing I've found to be valuable is to realize that the kind of question to ask your subconscious mind is something that will give you insight or that will help you to look at something from a different perspective, but not to answer a question for you. Like, you wouldn't want to ask a question like, should I move to California? Because that's not the province of your subconscious mind to make decisions for you. That's a conscious mind function. You could ask a question, though, like, please give me a dream that tells me what the learning opportunities are in California. Or, I want to have a dream about the question in my mind about moving to California, where you ask something that's more open-ended rather than a yes or no type of question, something that will give you insight. It's helpful, if you're not really sure what question you want to ask, to do a stream of consciousness writing. If you do know the question you want to ask, like if you want to participate in this dream incubation research we're doing, how can I better fulfill my soul's purpose? You write that question and then do the stream of consciousness writing for at least 10 minutes. 20 minutes is even better, but do it for at least 10 minutes. Stream of consciousness writing is when you just write nonstop. You don't let your pen stop. And so if you don't know what to write, you write, I don't know what to write, this seems really stupid. And then as you keep writing, there will be more that will come out of you where you actually will have thoughts. The purpose for doing the stream of consciousness writing is it's brainwashing in a good sense. And what I mean by that is whatever the ideas you have already in your brain, like, I'm never going to figure out what my soul's purpose is, or I already know what my soul's purpose is, or whatever those ideas are, you get all of that stuff out so you can open to a deeper reality or a deeper insight. And it's really kind of fun because no one else is going to read it besides you, so you don't need to worry about that kind of internal editor. And that's why if you just keep writing without stopping, and if you don't know what to say, just write, I don't know what to say, it starts to disconnect that internal critic or internal editor that tells you that what you have to say isn't good enough or smart enough or whatever your internal critic says. Everybody has their own version of it. So when you're done with the stream of consciousness writing, then what you want to do is to draw a picture, however you're picturing this question that you're asking. So I actually didn't do that when I was incubating the question about the title for this book. If I had done that, I probably would have drawn a picture like I was telling you, like walking into a bookstore, and I probably would have drawn a bookshelf with this book with, you know, some kind of square that would have the book title, because that's what I was expecting my dream would give to me. The reason you want to do words and pictures, the words will engage your conscious mind, the pictures will engage your subconscious mind, so you're getting a whole mind experience in incubating your dreams. You don't have to do this, but sometimes people like to do ritualistic types of things like lighting a candle. I know someone who has a particular pair of pajamas and he only wears those when he's incubating dreams. So it has that dream consciousness to it. You know, you can do something like that. I know somebody else who constructs a tent and sleeps outside because that's what the ancient dream incubation temples were like, and so he wants to recreate that experience as much as possible. So those kinds of things are really up to you. You know, just like the kind of dream journal you have is up to you. It's very, very, very helpful to clear your mind of any interference before you go to sleep. So if you can refrain from electronic devices, like don't use your cell phone, don't be on the computer, don't watch TV, for at least an hour before you go to bed. 2 would be better, but at least an hour. That's very helpful. And it's also helpful to not eat for probably a couple of hours before you go to sleep. You don't want to go to bed starving, so if you tend to eat late at night, on the night you're incubating dreams, I would recommend eating dinner earlier so that the purpose for that is so that your food's not your stomach's not digesting food when you're going to sleep. So you want to prepare your mind and your body to be able to be relaxed and to go into a deep state of sleep. If you find that you go to sleep and then you wake up, then write down whatever you remember when you wake up, even if it's at 2 o'clock in the morning or 3 o'clock in the morning, because it very well may be that what you wake up with at 2 o'clock in the morning is the answer to your dream incubation, even if it's only a word or one image in your mind. And so you want to capture that if you wake up in the middle of the night. If you wake up in the morning, then write down whatever you remember at the time. Then what you do with that could be the subject of a whole other lecture in terms of whether you interpret the symbols, whether you receive it literally. There's a lot of different ways that people work with dreams. One suggestion I do have is to find some way to honor the dream. So actually the epilogue of this book, most of the stories I've told you about dreams are in this book, and as I was writing it, I had a very long, epic kind of dream, so I decided to put that in the epilogue. And at one point in the dream, I was terrified, and it's kind of funny. In the dream, I was saying, if I had gotten better at lucid dreaming, I would be able to surrender to this and not try to wake myself up. But I made myself wake up, although I didn't end up actually being awake. I woke up into another dream, and I thought I was physically awake. And in the dream, I said, please give me some symbol or totem to help me. And in the dream, I saw the image that at the time I didn't know what it was called. It's called a Hamsa. It's a religious symbol that looks like a hand. I don't know if you can see it from there. That's what it looked like in the dream. And so after I had the dream, I did some research and found out that symbol is used in almost every religion of the world. And so I bought myself a necklace that has that symbol. And then as people started reading that book, some of my students gave me some earrings that have that symbol. And so I wear them sometimes because I asked for that symbol, and I found an image on the internet that I printed out, and so I concentrate on that before I meditate sometimes, because my dream gave that to me, and it's a symbol that has to do with the Creator. So there are some amazing things that your dreams can give to you if you ask them, and then what you do with that is up to you. So I'd like to open it to questions that you might have. Yes, sir.
Do you talk about dream incubation in your...
I do. There's a chapter about dream incubation, and it actually goes through a lot more steps than I gave you in a little more detail.
There's a question from someone watching online. Can dreams help us to understand what we will experience in our future?
That's a very good question about dreaming about the future. Dreams can help us to understand the future. Part of what I have discovered is that there's a kind of art to knowing when a dream is precognitive and when it's purely symbolic. And sometimes people don't know at the time they have a dream if it is about the future or not. And so that's one of the reasons why I really encourage people to write down their dreams, because when you record your dreams and then later you find out that this event that you dreamed about actually happens, that's part of learning what the quality is of dreams, which dreams are precognitive and which ones aren't. One of the ways, a very simple way that they can help shape the future is that they give us insight into our own attitudes. So once you become aware that you have certain ways of thinking, then you can use that to either make changes in your future, to say, okay, I'm taking the right steps, these things are important. So that's one way that dreams can be valuable in understanding the future too.
A follow-up question, all right. In 2005, I was in a bad vehicle crash while working as an armored car guard. For several months before the crash, I dreamt of it in complete detail as it actually happened, except that in the dream I didn't know if I lived or died. What do you think?
I'm glad you told what the dream was. What I think is that I'm glad you're alive, first of all. And if I had that kind of experience, I would use that to really pay attention to dreams, because I don't know if having the dream helped you to make some different choices or do some different things. I know of someone who, actually a few people who had dreams of car crashes that at the time they had the dream, they didn't know it was precognitive. And then in their waking life, all of a sudden they realized when things in their waking life were exactly the same as this dream that they had had, that they were headed for a crash. And so they were actually able to make some different choices. But one of my friends, for example, her car crashed, but she wasn't hit by the semi-truck that was coming over the hill. And so even though her car was totaled, she wasn't hurt. And if she hadn't had the dream, I think it's likely that she might have been struck by the semi instead of getting out of the way. So I don't know if there were changes that you made. If there weren't, what I would say is to pay attention to your dreams. You know, not that you have to be afraid of them, but if you have a recurring dream that seems like it's precognitive, then I would watch in your waking state to see if some of those similar occurrences are happening, that you might make some changes. One thing I do want to say is that sometimes when people have precognitive dreams about what happens with other people, like let's say a friend of yours had this dream, they should not feel guilty that you got in the car crash because they dreamed about it. So it doesn't mean that you're making it happen to someone else, but it might be something you could use to either warn someone else or to help prepare yourself for something that's happening. So sometimes that's why people have precognitive dreams, is that they help prepare us for something that otherwise might be too shocking if we didn't have the preparation for it.
This is coming from a little different direction, but I was part of a bereavement group for several months, and one thing I heard there from a number of people who had lost a spouse, husband or wife, was at some point they were quite sure that an animal had approached them, this is a waking experience, and spoken so engagingly and so directly to them that they were sure that that was their deceased spouse making contact with them from the beyond. Have you ever heard of anything like that, or does that mean much to you?
I have heard of that. I've heard people tell stories about that. I know that there's a lot of, I don't know about a lot, there's some religious traditions, like Native American traditions, that's a strong belief. I actually had some questions about that because a few days before my husband died, there was this owl that was roosting in the tree right outside our house, and I'd never seen it there before. it was there for those few days and then it was gone after he died. And several people said to me that that's a Native American symbol of like an omen of death. And so I don't know if that's true or not. I was going to say believe, and it's not just a belief, it's a knowing. I do know that people who have died can come and visit when we're awake, and people interpret it or receive it in different ways. I mean, sometimes they can feel the person's presence. And I have heard people talk about that, as well as other things in nature, like, you know, a feather drops down from the sky and there's no birds anywhere in sight, or there's some object that appears where it wasn't before. So.
If most of our dreams come from our subconscious, is there any way that we can greater prepare that? You know, like in our subconscious, we have our thoughts, some positive, some negative. If we do like meditation or something, so there's something like, sort of like clean it up so we don't have where there's garbage in the subconscious where it get a better read?
Yeah, that's a great question. I absolutely think that meditation helps so that we can more clearly receive what's in the subconscious mind. That's the way that I understand the subconscious mind. It stores truth and it stores understanding. And a lot of what we consider junk, I would actually call the unconscious part of the conscious mind, which in a dream, how I understand a house in a dream is that it actually symbolizes the mind, and that the basement in a house is a symbol for the unconscious part of the brain or the unconscious part of the conscious mind, where, you know, we kind of shove stuff we don't want to deal with. And so that's where that stream of consciousness writing can be really helpful, is to get out things that aren't helpful or that are getting in our way. There's an exercise that's really helpful that you can do before going to sleep, which is to remember backwards. Like how we teach our students to do it is 5 events backwards for 5 days backwards. Some other people I've heard just do like a review of the day, that they review their day backwards, so that it's kind of like if you had a desk that had a bunch of papers on it, you're taking each piece of paper and filing it where it belongs in the file cabinet. So it's kind of a way of, you know, clearing stuff out of your mind that doesn't need to be there. Sometimes just writing before going to bed can be helpful. You know, writing in a journal, not necessarily stream of consciousness, but if there are things that, you know, are kind of bugging you from the day. In terms of a general having your subconscious mind more conditioned, I think meditation is an excellent way to do that.
Do you think dreaming occurs only in the physical mind, or is there parts that actually can move into other dimensions, because sometimes your dream is just very surrealistic?
Yeah, I absolutely think that dreams occur in other dimensions. And, you know, this is interesting because people who study dreams don't even agree on what dreams are. I mean, there are as many different definitions of what a dream is probably as there are, you know, disciplines that study dreams. So the way that I understand a dream is that it's not a physical event. It has effects in the brain, but it's not caused by the brain. It's actually caused by the soul or the spirit wanting to communicate to us. And that's how I understand why dreams can be symbolic, is that the subconscious mind or the soul or the inner self, whatever you want to call it, wants to communicate to our conscious mind, which sometimes is not always perceptive. It wants to communicate to us the greater truth, whether it's greater truth about, you know, life and death, or greater truth about something that's happening on the other side of the planet, or experience in other dimensions. I definitely think that dreams can give that to us. I mean, that's why I think people can have dreams about an earthquake that's happening on the other side of the world when there's no brain information that they have about that. Or to have experiences with other people, or earth spirits, angels. I mean, people can have those types of experiences in dreams too. Sometimes ascended masters will come to people in dreams, particularly people who meditate and who direct their consciousness towards them. I mean, those are some of the intriguing prospects that I think dreams can have for us. Part of my belief and reason why I really encourage people to write down their dreams is that I would hate to have somebody have, a big dream like an ascended master is coming to them in a dream and they don't remember it because they're not used to paying attention to their dreams. Where when people are used to paying attention to their dreams, I think they'd be more likely to be open to those, what people call big dreams when they happen.
I was wondering if you could say a few words about the superconscious, like what that is involved in that.
How I understand the superconscious is that it has two primary functions. One, to hold a plan for our existence. And, not a plan like you're going to move to Chicago at this age and marry this person, more like a blueprint for our destiny, I guess, is how I would say that. And that it also supplies energy to the rest of the mind. So there's a kind of life force or inner urge. This is my belief, and what I practice is that there is a kind of inner urge that we each have to become compatible with our Creator. And so the urge that people have to express, to grow, to aid other people, however they express that, that's what I understand comes to us from superconscious mind, which is why it can also give inspiration, which is not necessarily the same thing as information.
Sometimes when I remember my dreams occasionally, but I'm not paying attention to them. But when I remember a person that was in it, what I do is now I'm thinking differently. But I'll call that person or write a letter or email them if that's what it is. Is that because they're on my mind? I mean, it could be as simple as that, but now you're saying the person can symbolize something else.
Yeah, that's a really good question, and this is how I work with that. What I learned through the School of Metaphysics is that every dream is about the dreamer, and every person symbolizes an aspect of the dreamer. And I do believe at one level that's true of all dreams, even the visitation dreams. So that's how I always start with a dream, is interpreting it symbolically. And then sometimes the dreams that are visitations or precognitive, I look at that as being kind of like an added layer to the dream. So I do that too sometimes, is if I have a dream that someone is in, sometimes I'll say to them, I had a dream and you were a character in it, or I'll say, especially if I think it is a precognitive dream, sometimes I'll say, I had this dream and I don't know if it's precognitive, do you want to know about it, instead of just telling them. Like I had a dream about someone who I don't know very well, and I was with someone else who I don't know very well, who's a very prolific lucid dreamer, and we were looking at this calendar that was November of 2014, and we were congratulating this other person because he had just given birth to a baby girl, and I even heard the name of the girl in the dream. And so, I thought, do I tell this person about this dream? And so I just emailed him, and I said I had this dream, and I don't usually do this. And, because it was a positive message, I thought, okay, I'll tell it to him. If it was a dream that he was in a car wreck and was going to die or something, I think I probably would have asked if he wanted to know it before telling it to him. Anyway, he was very glad to hear the dream, and he and his wife had been thinking about having another child, so, who knows if it was precognitive or not. So I think that's part of a personal choice, is to decide how to use dreams. And what I've found is that interpreting them symbolically, they always make sense. And what I've found in teaching that to people, they're amazed at how much it makes sense to them also. And so that's why I use that as kind of like the ground floor in terms of how I use dreams. And then sometimes those other dimensions are added to it. So like the dream that I had that I incubated about this lecture, I think that the person who was in it because it was symbolic. However, it is interesting to me that he had come to some programs at the School of Metaphysics, and then he kind of disappeared. And our school just celebrated its 40th anniversary. So it's kind of like there's all these people that are coming from seemingly out of nowhere, I think because we had a celebration for our 40th anniversary. So, you know, that's kind of opened my mind to why are these people coming into my life now? Because there's several people from different times and places in my past that have recently showed up. And so that's part of how I'm using those dreams is, you know, what do those people symbolize to me, and how does that relate to other things that are going on with me? So that's one way you might look at the people. If it's someone you know, if you can identify the qualities you see in them, like I see this person as being very encouraging or very disciplined or very friendly, that can tell you what they're symbolizing in you.